when you got out in the jungle, there was no room for prejudice.
Black Vietnam veterans. They were young, mostly poor, mostly undereducated. The foot soldiers of a mean and dirty war, and the targets of enemies that were not always Vietnamese.
Did you see a cross burned in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Where?
In front of my hut.
Tonight on Frontline, the Bloods of Nam.
From the network of public television stations, a presentation of KCTS Seattle, WNET New York, WPBT Miami, WTVS Detroit, and WGBH Boston. This is Frontline with Judy Woodruff.
Good evening. As Memorial Day approaches, we pause to remember our military veterans, those who lost their lives or had them forever changed in war. Tonight, some special remembrances from an overlooked group of veterans about an unpopular war. This evening, war stories about what it was like to have been young, black, and in Vietnam. A high percentage of the men on the front lines in Vietnam were black. By most accounts, they had the highest casualties. They say they were fighting two wars, the enemy and discrimination. But they also talk about battlefield brotherhood and lifelong friendships. Our program is written and reported by Wallace Terry, who covered the war for Time magazine and wrote a book on black soldiers in Vietnam. Our producer is Wayne Ewing. And now, the Bloods of Nam. And I must warn you, this program contains graphic descriptions of the horrors encountered in war.
Vietnam, a mean, dirty war. It consumed American passions for 15 years. It divided the nation more deeply than any other issue since the Civil War. Black soldiers fought and died in Vietnam in disproportionate numbers. That's why we call the front line Soulville. But Vietnam was our first integrated war. It was a time when soldiers, black and white, became brothers against a common enemy. If Vietnam had any redeeming value, it was this friendship. But it was also a place of discrimination, where to gain your self-respect, you stood apart and called yourself a blood. It was a place where communist propaganda urged you to go home instead of fighting another dark-skinned people. This is a film about what it was like to fight that war. What it was like to be in Vietnam and to be black. War stories from the Bloods who went to Nam. They came from the farms and from the ghettos, from high schools like this one, Thomas Edison in Philadelphia. They didn't have the money to sit out the war in college or leave the country. They joined the armed forces. They got drafted. Many of them never came back.
Vietnam is important because 54 former Edison students died in Vietnam. Today we have some Vietnam vets, a couple of which at least are former Edison students. They're going to give you their personal experiences. They witnessed Vietnam. They're going to help you to deal with this difficult concept of war. And
I came to listen to their stories and to hear the questions from the students. And I realized that they hadn't even been born when we went to Vietnam.
How did you feel when you first heard you were going to war?
I mean, the obvious answer. Scared.
For most of us and for you, you're 16 and 17 years old, and you think death is 60 years away from you. But the minute that somebody tells you something or says something that brings death close to your mind, you get scared. real scared. And at 19, they gave me orders to go to Vietnam, and my stomach dropped out. That's a fear. It's fear. Before you even get there, it's fear.
Imagine being on an airplane, getting off and walking into your mother's oven, because that's exactly what it was. When I woke up that plane, my skin broke into a white ash, like into a big sweat, and here I am in this hot climate. They say I have to stay for 13 months. I was scared, man. I was so scared. It's hard to believe I actually wetted on myself. I messed on myself. That first 4 months, I was terrified, you know, and it's a fright that it's unbelievable when you see people drop. You don't know what death is because most of us never see death, but at church, when a family member died. But to watch guys drop below you and you're wondering, what am I going to do? Fire a weapon? You know, practice is one thing, but shooting at somebody for real is something else.
I just got off the plane. They gave me these jungle fatigues and all this other stuff. And they went right to the sergeant, and he assigned me to a place. And that night, we got mortared. And I never forgot that because I thought because of being born and raised in North Philly and going through the street thing that I'd seen everything. Let me tell you, Tatum said it straight up. I was so scared I couldn't fire a weapon. I had this brother told me, he said, Jesse, you're going to get yourself together because every night you're going to be doing the same thing. I don't care all the jungle training and all the jump training and all this other stuff you young guys hear about. Don't prepare you for nothing when you get under real fire.
My name is Martin Fleming, and I'd like to know, did you ever kill anyone? And after you did that, how did you feel?
Touch that with it. I cannot speak for everybody, but it's a very powerful feeling to take a life. It's a very frightening feeling to take a life. It's not something that you say, I did it and I'm proud of it. You do it because if you don't, he will take you out. Your opponent, your enemy will take you out.
In Vietnam, you never really knew who might be the enemy. Peasants could be Viet Cong or innocent civilians.
In combat, there were many women and children that got trapped between the crossfires. And they're hollering and screaming, babies this small, own babies, women's, 60, 70 years old. When a firefight break out, you don't have time to tell someone, move out of the way, you go here and you go there because we're going to fight in this lane. There is no such time to do that. Usually a firefight may last a minute. The longest firefight may last 5 minutes. And you can reap a lot of destruction on anyone in a minute or 5 minutes.
I had been trained to kill and to fight, and I actually wanted to shoot the enemy, to shoot a North Vietnamese, to see how he looked when he'd fall, because we had been shooting rifles with blanks or protectors on the end. We had been shooting at a false enemy, and I was brainwashed, if you will. I didn't want to go to combat, but once there, I was eager to do the job that I had been trained to do.
The thing was you fire high, and then you fire low. In case the person was hanging in the rafters, they jump down, you get them when they hit the ground, and you fire about waist high. And I was getting ready to make that first sweep, because we would just go up to the building and fire in it, And I was getting ready to make this sweep. And then all of a sudden, this Vietnamese come and said, don't shoot, in Vietnamese. Don't shoot. And we opened up the side of this thing, and it was this whole family just laying, huddled there. And I was getting ready to blow these people away. Sight unseen. Well, I just dropped. I was like wigged out. My whole thing was like, God, what do I, coming, see, the Christian upbringing, every time you got to the point where you felt like you was going to really hurt someone, that would always come to the front of you and say, don't do this. And plus, unarmed women and children. Who wants that on their conscience? So from that moment on, I was very careful as to how I moved around people.
Malik Edwards grew up here at the mouth of the Mississippi in Phoenix, Louisiana. His folks were poor, but the friendships were rich.
Like all of this, man, this is where I played, this is where I ran. This is my whole world all through here, man. When I was growing up here, you couldn't walk by someone's house if you didn't speak to them. Because first thing they would say, did you sleep with me? Because that's the only person who had the right to walk by them during the day and not speak. So you had to speak to everybody. I remember when I went in the Marine Corps and we'd go through LA and I'd walk by people. They'd look at you, I spoke and say, good morning. I said, what's wrong with you? Because that's how I grew up, polite.
How you feel? All right?
It's so good to see you. I don't think there's a family here, unless they moved since I left, that I'm not related to in some way. Okay, all right. Take care now.
You do get a feeling of Smallville in Vietnam, don't you?
Yeah, I'm telling you, before they you know, did a lot of changes. Like if you look at that little group over in there and what that looks like, and if you look at these trees in here, and before they put this levee back here, that you really get the sense of it. The way that land mass was with all the bamboo and the briar and all that. So when I got to Vietnam, I could deal with the landscape. You know, it didn't even bother me, really. You know, while we went to Vietnam, we figured we can go in there and knock those people out in a couple of 6 weeks and we'd be back home. We said, we're going to go over here, take care of these people, and we're going to be back home. We'll be going on to finish our tour, going on to the Philippines and the rest of the Orient. We had no idea when we got to Vietnam that the war would last 10 years. We actually believed that when we got there, we'd be able to go there and just knock them right on out. Yeah, let's go over and take care of these little gooks, and that's going to be it. See what I'm saying? But then once we got there, we thought it was a totally different story, man. It was wild.
It wasn't like World War II. It was like Nova War, because we fought behind bushes. We fought like animals. We became animals, a lot of us. A lot of us stayed animals, and a lot of us are still animals.
Only the fittest survived on the streets where Gene Woodley grew up, 3 blocks from the Baltimore waterfront, the very bottom of the city, all bricks and mortar. Each step of the day, a constant test of your young manhood.
When I was a teenager, I did have a small portion of this neighborhood to myself. I used to be somewhat of a gang leader or group leader or whatever you want to call it. This basic project from where I used to live in Bethel Street back here to this corner used to be my area. Up this street on this side, most of my family lived on this side of the street.
That was your territory?
So that was my territory.
You owned it?
Yeah.
How'd you protect it?
I protected it any way I had to. Violence, force, false promises, anything. Anything. You know, like people had block groups and so forth. We had neighborhood gangs. We had to enforce ourselves upon them to be able to travel from one neighborhood to another. So you had to be the strongest. In this case, in this project, at the time, I had to be the strongest because I had the larger family group and I didn't take too much of shit. So I learned violence here, took it to school, and took it to Vietnam. And I brought it back with me. So I'm trying to get rid of it now. And it's kind of difficult. It's the same, almost same mentality was in Vietnam, the survival of the fittest. If you're weak down here, you die, you perish. Murder is not something you can be too human about because murder is killing one person, killing another. And you come into the realization either you're the one to kill or you're the one to be killed. So in the jungle, animal situation and the animal mentality that comes out in you because the natural instinct to survive is there. So you become an animal. And you find individuals in the woods with their penises sewed in their mouth, their ears and their fingers chopped up. They were actually mutilating us. And it got to be a game. It got to be the game of the fittest one, losers die.
So the communists were mutilating American bodies, right?
So we were mutilating them back in retaliation for what they was doing to us. I had a collection of 25, 26 ears and fingers that I wore to the field in downtown because it was a part of your manhood. It was part of that war mentality. Is this man will kill you if you defy him. He will murder you. He will destroy you. You're not only you, but your family and what you believe in, because that's the way kind of war it became.
Did you think about returning home heroes? Were you apathetic about it all? Or did you constantly think about dying?
Most of the people that I knew that got wiped out either the first 30 days or the last 30 days. First 30 days because you didn't know shit. The last 30 days, they either got careless or didn't care. Me, I didn't think about being a hero when I came back. All I wanted to do was get back. I mean, until you got on that plane and that plane got off the runway and into the air, you were fair game because they mortared the airfields. They didn't want you guys to leave.
After being there for a while and seeing people die and killing, and to kill you must be able to kind of numb yourself out to do it. You just don't care anymore. You care. Got a lucky rabbit's foot. You got a lucky pair of drawers, you know? I don't care. I do whatever I can to survive. And that's the attitude you take after a while. Anything goes, I'll do anything I can, and I'll make it.
See, my job was waking up in the morning, going out on a search and destroy mission, meaning that I will search out the enemy and I will destroy him, that I will kill him. And after passing the time, right, it was really a heavy burden on my mind at first. But once you start being shot at and you see some of your buddies fall to your left and to your right, you start to be conditioned to it. But there was one thing that got next to me is that I got to the point that I started to enjoy killing. I started to get a psychological high over it. When I walked over a body, especially an enemy body, I would get a psychological lift from it. And when I saw my own men go down, I felt bad about it, but I always say, thank God it's not me.
We came upon the fallen helicopter, and in that same note, we heard cries. We investigate, me being the team leader and point man. It was my job to find out, first of all, what was going on in the area. I patrolled the area by myself, stumbled upon an individual staked out with all the skin peeled from top forehead, low penis area. He had been staked out at least a day, day and a half now. A lot of people say, well, day and a half is not a long time, but we're talking about a humidity that's 140 degrees in the shade. Temperatures 150-something in the sun. This man had been staked out with small animals, maggots, flies, any type of insect that you can think of, had been feeding off of his flesh, where he was totally exposed to the elements. He was on approximately 2, 3, 4 hours away from naturally dying from his injuries. We called in to the company area to inform them we had found a human being. They had instructed me to eliminate, and that they were not going to take responsibility. As a team leader, I should take the responsibility. And in taking the responsibility, the young man and myself sat down for about 20 minutes or more and contemplated his death. And in essence, I killed him.
Let's go back to who he was.
I'm not telling you.
No, not... Was he an American?
He was an American GI. A European American white male.
What did he say to you?
Please, kill me.
How did you do it?
Closed my eyes, pulled the trigger.
What did you pull?
M16 full magazine.
Where?
In his temple.
Who was present at the time?
No one.
Why not?
No witnesses. No crime.
So the rest of the team was somewhere else?
Yeah.
Did you discuss it with the rest of the team?
Will not. Cannot. No.
How tough was that enemy in Vietnam?
We fought good soldiers. You didn't realize quite how good they were when you were fighting down south, when we called them the Viet Cong, because they would hit and run, and you seldom saw them. But then when we moved up north, up around Dong Hai and Ca Tien, we started facing the North Vietnamese regulars. And they, of course, had new uniforms, new packs, used arm and hand signals, and it was almost like fighting another Marine Rifle Company. And they were good.
I was just amazed how these little people could do so much to stop. You take one man and hold up a whole battalion. You gotta spend $100,000 in rounds to kill him.
On this various occasion that we went out on a search and destroy mission, we ran into one North Vietnamese hardcore soldier. He was a regular, meaning that he was trained in North Vietnam, and a platoon of 30 to 35 men surrounded this one Vietnamese soldier in a tunnel. And we had interpreters. And we talked to him for about 2 hours trying to talk him out of the hole. And then we turned to our tactics of throwing grenades into the tunnel, shooting into it. We fired everything in there. And we still used the interpreter to try to talk him out of it. But we spent 2 hours, 35 men against one. Took 2 hours to kill this man. And the only way that we killed him was that one of the men out of that platoon went in there with a shotgun and beat him to the draw. He would not give up. And this is the day that I really will remember in my life, that if a man have a belief, a real belief, he should be willing to die for it. Now, I was proud of that North Vietnamese soldier because he gave me a living example of what a man is supposed to be.
I like the Vietnamese. I just was very sorry we had to do what we did there. But I didn't really dislike them. I thought they were very beautiful people. I thought they, were real nice, except for the ones who were standing in front of my front sight blades, trying to hurt me. That person, we had problems. But basically, I like the Vietnamese. I didn't really think of them as bad people, but, we had a war, and we were trying to save them from communism. Of course, you never realize, when you go into the villages and watch them going through their changes, as we walk through the villages, that, you wonder, do they know why we're here?
When you were in Vietnam, do you think you looked at what was happening, at the people, any differently because you were black?
Yeah. What happened is, I think being black, you felt more affinity with people who had problems, who were in trouble. You felt more of an affinity with them because you had had trouble and you had problems.
I understand that during Vietnam War, Martin Luther King died. I want to know, did that bring up a lot of racial issues?
I happen to live in an all-black hut. It was the first all-black hut in Vietnam. And there were 8 of us in the hut. And it was interesting that even before we knew that he had been killed, all of a sudden these Confederate flags started flying over a lot of the Quonset huts and some of the major facilities. And we kind of tried to figure out where our head was at. Like, what do we do now? Do we take these folks on? Because we went to a couple of the huts and asked them to take flags down because we knew what it symbolized. They weren't up the day before. They were up that day. But I think it really hit us when over one of the warehouses, they had to be about 8 by 10 foot flag, Confederate flag, flying over the American flag. We went to the CO of the base and said, look, if you don't get these flags down, there's going to be a problem. A very serious problem. Within 15 minutes, all the flags were down. Yes, there were some problems.
In the months that followed King's death, black militancy swept across the rear areas. Bloods like Randolph Dobie organized themselves, raised their fists in black power salutes, studied black history, wore black beads and berets, and even chose to live in all-black hooches.
Well, they had all-white hooches, and they did that primarily for commonality of interest. There was no assignment of hooches. Basically, the whites or any group of Marines could elect to stay in a certain hut. Then we went to the CO and asked if we could have our hut so that we could have a hut of common interests and goals and relationships. And the CO granted us that privilege.
Now, how did your fellow white Marines feel about this all-black hooch in their midst?
Well, at first, they didn't seem to have any problems, but later on, there were a couple of incidences of cross burnings, and they even tried to burn down the hut once.
What do you mean cross burnings? Did you see a cross burned in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Where?
In front of my hut.
What did you do when you saw a Confederate flag flying over a forward base?
The damn thing came down. And the commander answered to me.
Why did you bring it down?
Because we weren't fighting the Civil War. And there's no such thing as northern blood or southern blood. There can be no such thing as black blood and white blood when you're being fired at. And the interesting thing is, I never saw that happen in forward areas. It was only when you got to the relative security of the main base on the perimeter that you saw that happen.
There was a amount of prejudice in Vietnam, but when you got out in the jungle, there was no room for prejudice because you would want your enemy to see that other silhouette that's standing beside you, regardless of his color, because he got more targets to shoot at. So this is what taught me that this is just a tradition that would just pass down to us, to be prejudiced, to look upon people differently. Because when your life is at stake, it doesn't make any difference that the man to the left or the right of you is black, yellow, red, orange. It makes no difference. As long as he performs his duty and protects your back. Now, this is what caused me to throw away, to sit down and reanalyze a lot of concepts that I had, thoughts that I had, you know, especially when I was in Vietnam. I got, you know, very militant, black power, brother, and everything. But when I thought over my experience, I came to the conclusion I would be worse than the perpetrators who are inflicting discrimination against me if I try to reverse discrimination, because I know better. I know how it feels to be discriminated against.
Molly, did it ever seem consistent to you to grow up in a segregated society and then go off to the Marines and defend it?
Well, you know, you didn't really, you see, we always believed that the country was going to change. You know, you figure, well, these people are this way because they don't know us. They don't really understand us as a people. And you start like feel that maybe once they got to know us and check out our values and see where we were coming from, because I grew up with all of those traditional values, love for home, family, and country, and God. God first. I grew up with that. And you see, as small as this town is, we have 3 churches because religion was a very focal point in our community. And we figured that, well, in time, the country would believe in us. They would see that we were good Americans. We were just as together as they were, and it would be better. Well, I found out that that wasn't necessarily true in the Marine Corps.
The last segregated unit fought in Korea. I believe the year was 1950, where it was disbanded. So from 50 to the 17-year period since, you could say that pretty much complete integration had taken place. You found mixed units, of course. You found black officers, white officers. In Vietnam, you found a variety of units, but there was no restriction in the sense of blacks could do this or blacks could do that. It's fairly much integrated.
You know, in Vietnam, we had our first company commanders and probably squadron commanders and company first sergeants, and gave people an opportunity to get, you know, a tremendous amount of experience. It gave our comrades an opportunity to work with us and see that, you know, that the black American Marine could meet any task that anyone else was. In fact, there was just no different. And things will never be the same as it was prior to Vietnam.
The majority of your ground units were composed to a significant number of minority troops. It was not unusual to find rifle companies that were over 50% black. And why would that be? Well, let's face it, as you come into the military, you're crafted into a skill according to various testings that are given to the individual. And with the Marine Corps especially, which is ground intensive, you'll find that the majority of those coming in would be sent to ground types of billets. And when you're in the Marine Corps and you speak of ground, you're speaking of a rifleman, you're speaking of a grunt, a foot soldier. Therefore, the majority of minorities who came in were tested and placed in ground billets, specifically riflemen. And therefore, you had, in my opinion, a much higher proportion of black casualties as opposed to the entire population.
The military didn't begin to integrate until during and after the Korean War, and the Vietnam War was the first war where there was an integrated fighting force in the history of America.
The integration part was your minority and your poor whites and Hispanics.
Yes.
That's who fought the war.
Joe was one of my best friends in Vietnam. He was a white dude from Georgia, and he had a real accent. Joe used to walk point. Point in a military operation is the first man that leads the company. Joe was walking maybe about the 3rd man in front of me. I was about the 3rd man behind Joe. And then as we were walking along a well-used trail by the enemy, Joe hit a booby trap which blew him up in the air 8 feet in the air, and he came back down and landed on his buttocks with his hand behind him in this position. And the booby trap had blown off his entire right leg across here. And the only thing that was holding on his right leg was a piece of Joe flesh, maybe about as thick as my thumb, was holding his leg to his body. And Joe was semi-conscious. But when Joe regained consciousness and raised up and saw his leg, that he missed a whole leg, he went into shock. When this happened, the medics were on him right away, but Joe never made it to the hospital because they said that he died from shock. And at this time, that when Joe got hit, I couldn't go rush over there to Joe because usually you don't do things like that. I had to move in front of the trail and guard the trail and watch for the enemy so that the medevac, the medical helicopter, could come in and pick Joe up and take him back to one of the real hospitals. And so all this time that I'm waiting for the helicopter to come out, I'm praying to God, please let me see the enemy. Lord, please let me see anyone. And then it got so bad that I was standing there waiting, watching that trail. I said, Lord, anybody, a woman, a child, anybody, I just wanted to kill someone because I lost a real friend. And I've carried this with me from that day until now. I will never, ever forget Joe. Although Joe's family might forget him, his wife and his child might forget him, but I will never, ever forget Joe.
I was a pilot of a F-105 Thunder Chief fighter bomber. And my target that day was a surface-to-air missile installation just northeast of Hanoi. And I was leading a flight of 4 Thunder Chiefs on that target on 22nd of October, 1965. Just prior to the target, I realized I'd been hit. And to back that up, I had been flying at treetop level for 34 minutes at better than 500 miles an hour all the way. And about 2 minutes after I delivered my weapons on the target, the aircraft exploded.
Fred Cherry was lucky to land in one piece. Bullets whizzed by his parachute, his shoulder was smashed, and his wrist was broken. He was the 43rd American captured in the North, and the first black. The communists tied him up and took him to a schoolyard where villagers poured out shouting, "Kill the Yankee."
The first thing I can remember saying is, looking around, I says, damn, I'll be here a long time. But that long time to me at that point in time was 3-4 months max, because we're going to get this thing over with and we'll be back home. Well, that 3 to 4 months, that long time I considered at that time, turned into be 7.5 years.
A few days before, a young Navy pilot from Tennessee took off for North Vietnam from the carrier Independence. Porter Halliburton and Fred Cherry would soon find their lives forever intertwined.
I was one of these guys that just never thought too much about being captured. I thought, well, maybe I would get killed, but never captured.
I think the Vietnamese had learned enough about Hallie. You know, he was a Navy aviator. I'm a Air Force aviator. I'm a Southern black. He's a Southern white. He's younger than I.
I don't know whether they thought moving me in with Fred was going to be the ultimate horror or not, the thing that would break me. But there was no reason for it. I had not suddenly decided to talk to them. I hadn't done anything, and they had not threatened me with that specifically.
The communists wanted Fred to broadcast orders to the Bloods fighting in the South to give up the war. It would be a propaganda coup, so they tortured him.
I spent a total of 702 days in solitary confinement.
Well, I think the stakes were basically his honor. I don't think that he could have lived with himself, you know, if he had done that, if he cooperated with him and with them. I think he could have secured for himself much better treatment, perhaps even early release, because certainly being the first black there, I mean, he was, could be somewhat of a celebrity, certainly would generate a lot of interest in the press and so on. And if he'd been cooperative, then of course they would have treated him very well, and I think they may have considered releasing him early.
One period there in 67, 93 days straight. That included beatings 3 times a day or more. I think the guards were obligated to do it at least 3 times, and if they wanted to throw something in extra, that they could do that too. And that is living in leg irons, and the beatings, and almost half the time when you reach down to pick up your bowl of soup, water soup, that was knocked over on you, and it's summertime, and it's hot, and there's ants, and there are flies, and...
I never felt at any point that it would be better if Fred gave in to him, even if he got medical treatment.
Hallie did everything one can do to keep one alive. That was bathe me, feed me, even his food, if I could handle it. Most times I didn't want mine.
I counted up one day and he had something like 9 major open wounds in his body at one time. And that's not counting the one on his shoulder. So it's pretty tough watching him, even though he didn't complain very often.
They came in and told Hallie to suit up. He was moving. And we couldn't believe it. Good Lord, I lost everything if I lose Hallie. But they took him and away, and I was left. It was at night. And that's the most lonesome night I've ever spent in my life.
I knew it was not going to be good, and I was really heartbroken.
Why?
Because I'd grown to love him.
They were standing right there when they told him to suit up and let's go, and because in spite of what the hell they said, we were gonna say goodbye because we were both shedding tears, but they took him.
It would be over 6 years before Porter Halliburton and Fred Cherry would see each other again. That's when they came home with the other POWs. But they were the only ones who got a hero's welcome.
When you come back, everybody, they give you, was it 22 hours? Get back here. And you have to make a crazy adjustment because you were in a killing situation. Now you're back in what they call back in the world. You have to be civilized now. No debriefing or whatever word they want to call that, I don't know if you can understand the kind of psychological change that you had to change into.
For the most part, we were looked upon as baby killers, drug addicts, malcontents, and any other kind of negative concept that you would have. We bore them. We weren't accepted by our own peers for the most part because they were protesting against the war. The older folks didn't accept us because they said we were losing the war.
As a black serviceman coming home, one, to be ostracized for having participated in the Vietnam War, and then to return to a society that still was not fully accepting of a black's capabilities would be a double hurt. And I think that in many instances, the reaction on the part of the black veteran was to become violent in terms of demanding what was felt to be his due. But in other cases, those not mentally strong enough took other paths. And it was tragic. And it still is. It's not over yet.
You know, Gene, when the guys came home from World War II, they came home with same units, 2 or 3 weeks on the troop ship. When they got here, the bands were playing. Vietnam was all different. You guys came home one at a time.
I didn't come home with no band playing. They took us out of the field, had camouflage paint still on me, had all my jungle fatigues, and we got in the airplane at Cameron with Oakland, California. They gave us a meal, allowed me to shave, put on a new clean uniform, gave me transportation home, and sent me right back here.
This is the place.
This is the house where I was raised up. And when I came here, I stood right in the middle of this street here and screamed up at the house, fighting the door, and there wasn't nobody home. So I would run down the street, went up down trying to find where my parents had moved to. And I found my grandfather, and he notified me that my folks had brought a new home and had moved away. So I went to the house and knocked on the door when nobody let me in because nobody recognized me. And the lady came to the door, which was my mother, said I wasn't her son because her son was still in Vietnam. So we argued for a while, and I gave her some examples of things only her and I should know by being mother and son, and she consequently did let me in the house. So it was like rebuilding or refurbishing my whole life over again after I got back home.
You made her nervous?
Yeah, still do.
She's scared of you?
Yeah. She says she's not, but you can sense it. Once you've been in a combat situation and sense fear and death and everything, those things never leave you. You can still sense the fear and the resentment. And it's Charles trying to explain to them who I am, because I'm totally different from the person who left here, the person that's standing here now, 16, 17 years ago. So those differences are still there.
Does she love you?
I think so.
Did she ever tell you that?
No. I think they're afraid. I think they're really afraid.
After I came home, I had problems. I had no respect for, the law enforcement agency because I had the power of life and death in my hand. I was the enforcer of the law. So I had a problem there because I was out here killing people for a living, enjoying it, getting a psychological high from it. Then I'm suddenly thrusted back here to the United States. I didn't have any post-war treatment or anything.
Charlie returned to Pompano Beach, Florida, filled with a rage he could not define. His was a family of migrant farmhands. Charlie's mom remembers what it was like having him back.
When he came home, he just was all upset. We had to take him to the VA hospital and let him take treatment.
What kind of treatment?
Well, I don't know what all kind of treatment they give him, but that's the only release I could get for him, because when he first came home, he didn't care about nothing. Everything you see, he just go and take down or either chunk or break it down.
Do you think the war made him that way?
He sure was, because when he went in there, he wasn't like that.
People who are in a hostile environment for a prolonged period of time needs post-war treatment. Society either pay it now or pay it later, because there are always going to be repercussions from any type of conflict.
All right, in the beginning of the dream, it's footsteps walking toward me. I'm in a sort of dark, clouded, quiet place. Sounds coming toward me. It's almost basically the same incident in reverse. I imagine myself in the place of this human being, staked out, skin peeled, small animals and insects feeding off my body. And someone sits beside me, no face, just a voice, and says, "Time to die." And we talk. I cry, they cry, and the lights go out. But I wake up. I ask for in the dream is relief from the dream, release from the dream itself. And there is no release. There is no escape from the dream because it's part of me. It's become a unnatural part of me now.
About 3 a.m., we received incoming mortar rounds. And I suppose about the first round that came in must have hit me. I was asleep. I recall very vividly the words, amputate. The next morning when I woke up, a medic came by about the extent of my injuries, and he said, "Well, didn't the doctor tell you?" I said, "No." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you don't have a left foot now." And I thought, oh my, what's my mother gonna say when she hears this?
There have been 2 more operations, and Bob Mountain has lost his leg below the knee. He's now chief of the prosthetics unit at the Richmond, Virginia VA hospital, and a runner. In 1982, Bob set the world record in the 100 and 200 meters for amputees.
Being a disabled veteran, I thought that I might not ever participate in any athletic endeavors, especially on a competitive basis. So this has opened a lot of doors for me.
You ever think about why it is that you're out here?
Well, I know why I'm here. I'm a national record holder, a past world record holder. I'm here because I intend to be the world record holder again before I retire. Now, if why I'm out here is related to the disability and how I lost it, then no, I don't think about that. I think I've dealt with that in the past. I've reckoned with myself and with God, and just in talking with God in my belief, I don't have any problem with that. We have to train just as hard if we want to be in the Win Play show. We have to be just as dedicated.
At the 1985 National Sports Festival in Baton Rouge, some of America's best amputee athletes gather for an exhibition race.
I'm thinking that this is an opportunity for me to assist America in realizing that it is one's ability and not one's disability that counts. That I have to run this 100 meters like I've never run before. I took my first world record medal and my Purple Heart, and I gave it to my mother for keepsake.
Gene Woodley has found no such victory since coming home. He can't buy his mom the house he promised. Life is not secure. Life is $50 a week running a storefront counseling service for any vet Gene can scare up. But Gene has found a friend who keeps him on an even keel. Cortland Ward served in an airborne unit like Gene.
We're not just men who sit around and watch soap operas and watch the world go around. We have to be occupied, and we have to have things to do constructively. If not, then we will stray, and we will take that knowledge that we've learned in combat situations and use them in a more negative sense. Cortland Ward, my best friend, have given me those support systems that allows me to go out and do a lot of positive things, because I know now that I have someone to lean on. And in essence, he has that same shoulder to lean on, which is mine. So we give support to each other.
They took us at a very influential age, forced a lot of sick stuff on us, and then left us to sort this stuff on our own. And we weren't able to do this because we were too young to sort out these things. I helped Gene basically by talking to him, being with him, and being able to be there at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning if something were to happen bad, you know, whether it's a bad flashback or a bad dream, what have you. Just being there, just knowing that I'm there, I guess, helps.
But Gene cannot forget.
Basically, what I believe is that I'm here because he's not. Because in the conversation that I have not expressed to you or to anyone else until this time, the conversation him and I have is that I had to live for him. He had to die for me. Yeah, that's why it was so important when I had the opportunity to meet Cortland to get that positive aspect back to my life, because I had portrayed those people that I had promised that I was going to make something of myself and achieve something and make this country know that they're not going to forget us. Because I cannot forget, and I will not let this country forget. To me, Cortland is my family. He's my survival. He brought me back to this peace and tranquility. Yeah, so that's why we're here together as friends. Yeah. So we share these opportunities together because we know that there are not too many of them that we have left as people who believe in something. Because what's happening is this country, this city, have very little things to believe in anymore. And we have to believe in each other because we only strong together.
Do you remember the DAP? Do you still do the DAP 16 years later?
You'd have to take me through it.
I could show him
just
one.
a modified
one. Okay.
The dap was the unofficial greeting of one blood to another, an occasion of endless handshakes and grips, a 2-minute way of saying, you are my brother and I will die for you, and meanwhile, blood, I'll see you back in the world.
Him that I will serve him until I die. I can't fall down that
I passed Bethel AME Church many times, and it finally aroused my curiosity to the point that I couldn't tolerate it anymore. So I stopped one Sunday and attended church, and I have been attending that church since that time. And I met a lot of nice people there, wherein that when I got in their presence, that I didn't have to put on a cosmetic face for them, that I could just be myself, because I knew what terrible or wrong that I had reaped upon humanity, that I got to the point that I started to enjoy taking human life. It gave me a psychological high. So these people played a major force in my life that redirected my life from the violence that I had grown to love to another side of life, which is peaceful, which is subtle, which is meaningful.
I was out of the Marine Corps 3 weeks, and I joined the Black Panther Party because at least they were fighting, and it wasn't like singing and marching and, you know, being spit upon, and, you know, we had to fight. And so I joined the Black Panther Party. You know, sometimes when people talk about delayed stress, there's a lot of stress being in the Black Panther Party, and I have nightmares about that too. Like, my nightmare is I'm in the brig, in the Black Panther Party, the Marine Corps, and Huey Newton is mad with me at the same time. That is my nightmare. Being in the Marine Corps and the Black Panther Party at the same time is my nightmare.
Until this day, Fred Cherry and Porter Halliburton had not seen each other in 8 years.
There he is.
Right there. There he is. Long time. Looking good. Prosperous and everything. Good to see you. Take it back. Sure, thanks. You remember when we first moved together?
Oh,
It was the end of November.
Yes.
65. Cold as hell.
Cold as hell.
God, man.
Cold as hell.
What'd you think when I walked in that room?
Well, I haven't gone through all these survival schools, and I was expecting to put a plan in with me and all this kind of thing to try and pick my brain.
Yeah.
And here you come, handsome, black hair, looking like I would expect a young Frenchman to look.
So you thought I was some kind of plant?
Yeah, I thought the Vietnamese put me in there to find out things. And just didn't take
How long was it before you figured I was for real?
It was days before I was really sure.
Really?
You know, when I started finding out so much family, and
well, you never told me
when
that,
we start tapping through the wall and stuff,
Yeah.
and then you taught me the tap code and all this stuff. He's for real.
I think most people would have cashed it in, yeah.
What kept him going?
I think he had very strong beliefs. He believed very deeply in our country, for one thing. He was a true patriot, is a true patriot. And I think he believed in our society, in spite of all the prejudices and things that he had experienced before. I think he really believed in what America was all about, what we were trying to do in Vietnam.
Why is it they never found Fred's breaking point?
Oh, he's tough. Too tough.
Hallie, I don't think he ever really knew how I appreciate what he did for me. I really wish he knew how I felt and how much I appreciated it, and how I really felt that he saved my life, that I owe my life to him.
Since the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington 3 years ago, hundreds of other memorials to those who fought that war have been erected in communities across the country. Perhaps the country is saying, no matter how unpopular the war, we should always remember all of those who fought and died. Next week on Frontline, a sensitive look at the lives of people who suffer from mental illness.
Mental illness strikes 1 out of 5 American adults. How do these people feel about their lives?
See, I'm mentally ill, I'm hard of hearing, and I'm different. See, I got all that on me.
Little kids laugh at me, think I'm a clown. That hurts.
They are alone and afraid.
I'm not going to start crying here.
A sensitive portrait of people caught in psychological storms.
The program is called A Matter of the Mind. It is next week on Frontline. I'm Judy Woodruff. Good night.
For a transcript of this program, please send $4 to Frontline, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH, Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Frontline was provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Schools, colleges, and other organizations interested in purchasing or renting video cassettes of this program may call 800-424-7963 or write PBS Video, Post Office Box 8092, Washington, D.C. 20024.
This is 13 WNET Newark.
On 13. At 9, Invincible Pioneers in the Integration of American Sports.
I'll show you what a real champion is.
Black Champions in New Times. And at 10, a champion mayor.
I once dreamed of a city called heaven and tried to make it my New York.
Tony Lobianco is his honor, an Emmy-winning portrait of New York's legendary mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia. That's tomorrow on 13.
The Bald Crusader for Justice is coming to 13. Telly Savalas is Kojak in the Marcus Nelson murders. Jose Ferrer and Ned Beatty also appear in Friday night's Star movie at 11. Is the proposed ban on smoking in public places
in the shock incarceration program. All chose the 90 days.
Nobody really told me what it was, just the people on the cell block I was on, everybody had a different story, a different idea to what it was. Some said it was some kind of school, others says it was a work camp. Some said that you go in there and get processed and get out. I didn't know. I hope it's not too hard.
Detail, move out.
This is the first chance or break for these young men before they go into a regular prison environment. They come in here thinking this is just another game, that we're going to set them down there and teach them this and teach them that. But the first thing I tell them, I'm not here to rehabilitate you. I'm not here to teach you a vocation. I'm not here to teach you to read and write. I'm here to show you what prison life's all about. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Time to get up. Get up now and open your doors. Get up now and open your doors. Step outside.
Prison life begins at 5:30 every morning. You've got 5 seconds to get up and get out of your cell. If you're slow, you're in trouble. The workday has already begun.
The
program is unique in the fact that it's run just like military basic training. We try to get their attention when they first come in the door and keep their attention for 90 days. We try to teach them discipline as far as their work habits, their own individual discipline to teach them to keep their eyes and ears open, their mouths shut, and do what they're told.
After breakfast, they are divided into small details. And in what the inmates call the Dodge Shuffle, they march off to different work sites. Once there, it's 8 hours of back-breaking work. What do you say to critics who would say that this is a throwback to the old days of chain gangs and hard labor?
I say that this program works. Sometimes, you know, hard labor and sweat and tears might get their attention easier than some type of program where they lay around all day and go to school and do whatever they want to.
Nobody looking around.
I've been in this prison system for 12 years. I've worked at 4 different prisons. I've carried people out that've committed suicide in prison. I've seen people with their throats cut in prison. I know what prison life's all about. And I'll do anything that I can within my power to keep these young people out of prison.
Jordan, Kennedy, and Turner, come over here. Where are you at, Kennedy and Turner? This man says all 3 of you have been putting your hands on him, calling you their bitch, playing with him all the time. Is that right? Yes, sir. Is that right? Why? Don't you have anything better to do than that?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Are you all 3 homosexuals? Is that what it is?
No, sir.
Then what are you playing with him for? Why don't you keep your hands to yourself? Let me tell you what's going to happen to all 3 of you. If I hear this again, I'm going to put you in front of that court, and I'm going to send you over here where somebody put their hands on you. Is that what you like?
No, sir.
You couldn't handle it over there. None of you could. You man enough to handle it when them guys grab you over there? 2 or 3 of them grab you over there? Want to take you to bed with them? Is that what you want? Look up here at me. By God, you better understand what I'm telling you. I better not come in here one more time and find any of you in trouble.
Yes, sir.
In a real sense, you're the monster man.
I am the monster man of this program, that's right. I'm the disciplinarian. I'm the man that gets their attention.
You understand that?
Yes, sir.
I don't really enjoy it, but I know it has to be done.
One more time. That's all I want to hear.
Some of these young men you can't treat nice because then they will try to run over me. They will try to con me. I mean, they're always doing it. They try to con me, but I've been conned so many times and have had this game played on me. I know just about what's going to happen before they ever do it.
The inmate never gets away with anything. One step out of line means public humiliation, even if it's just trying to be alone for a few minutes.
Get up and move where you're supposed to be sitting. Fill these tables up 1 chair at a time. All right. No, it ain't all right. It's yes, sir. You understand that? Yes, sir. Move. How long did it take you to move? Not long.
This place is scaring the crap out of me. And I hope I'm out 20 years from now so I can look back on this and remember and know how I felt then so I won't never get in no more trouble.
Of over 800 who have completed the program, fewer than 7% have been arrested again. That's a much lower repeat rate than any other program around. But it doesn't work for everyone, like Michael Bradley.
I didn't come in with the right attitude. You know, I wasn't prepared for it. Instead of taking out what they had to dish out, I was dishing it back, and you can't dish out anything here. In order to make this program, you have to make sacrifices.
And you weren't willing to do that?
Well, I was trying a little, but then I said I can't hack it.
He does not listen when he's told to do something. He does not like to work. He's been verbally abusive to my officers, and I will not stand for that.
What's the next stop for Michael Bradley?
The next stop for him is a revocation hearing before that judge, and after that, a regular prison.
I don't want to go to prison. I think sometimes I'm about to go crazy thinking about what's going to happen in the future. They endured a whole lot more than I did, so they're still out there working, and I'm still in a room locked up. You know, it takes a lot out of you to be in this program.
I just wish that if I could, I would turn the hands of time back and
start my life all over again because I realize that I have made a mistake, and a mistake that I'm going to have to learn to cope with. And you learn by your mistakes. I have been taught that, and it's just that every man has his weakness, and a mistake, like I said, a mistake has been made, and then now I'm paying for my mistake, and it's a mistake that I'll never make again.
% of you.
Every so often, a portly fish peddler.
Already screwed our eyes up now.
I'm Forrest Sawyer, the first live interview with the survivors of the schooner that sank off Puerto Rico, and actor Tom Cruise, tomorrow on the CBS Morning News.
Next, T.J. Hooker hits Hawaii with hurricane force in an all-new 2-hour movie.
He's playing with dynamite.
Caught in an affair of political corruption and a terrorist conspiracy that makes everyone expendable.
Dead man.
James Darren, Heather Locklear, and William Shatner as T.J. Hooker in Bloodsport.
This is CBS.
Is your drinking water tainted with dangerous chemicals?
I think a lot of people are just fed up with water and would rather buy water and get it out the tap.
Channel 2 News tested the best-selling bottled waters and found out that 5 out of 10 contain dangerous impurities, including chloroform. Is tap water any safer?
It's very natural.
Well, that was tested too. So before you drink another glass of water, watch our exclusive report tomorrow on Channel 2 News at 5.
Hey, Diddle Diddle, a cat with a fiddle picked a handy new value pack. Free bonus fries, large Coca-Cola, and McDonald's Great Big Mac. Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men with a tub pick 3 different value packs. Special price with McDLT, quarter pounder with cheese or Big Mac. So little Jack Horner, get out of your corner, get McDonald's value pack. But Jack be nimble, Jack be quick when the offer ends.
That's it. Coming up tomorrow on Channel 2 News at 5.
It's often said a woman's place is in the home. It's not often said that can be a dangerous place to be. Violent family fights are so common in this country, there's another one every 18 seconds. They account for the deaths of 1 out of every 3 women who are murdered. It's the most frequent call for help police get, and the one they're most at odds about how to answer. Domestic violence has always been considered a lesser category of crime. Police departments like Phoenix are changing that.
Right now, it's exactly 11:15 on the Don Crawford program at Cool AM 96.
Sir, back for the family fight, 4936. 390 ex-husband is inside that 20, fighting with the complainant. It's unknown on weapons.
How you doing, partner? Who's your partner? Put your hands up here where I can take a look at him, will you? Who's your partner? Be cool, man. Who's your partner, Back away, lady. Back away so it doesn't hurt you. Back away.
And if you don't relax, you're not going to push it 3.
Doors that way.
Claudine Denny was desperate when she called the Phoenix police on her 30-year-old son, Ray. He'd already kicked in her trailer door and thrown the phone through the window.
I should have sent him to jail the first time if you could have caught him. I just should have done it. But he's very, very dangerous.
Look, I got a head injury right here. You see that, baby?
Do you feel safer if he goes to jail for the night?
Yes. Yes, I would. It's went on too long. I don't know what to do. I've tried to help him out. I've tried everything. I don't know what to do anymore with him.
Her call to the police has already done it. Her son Ray will be booked into jail for the night. In Phoenix, police policy requires them to arrest a violent family member if there's evidence violence has taken place. But policies don't answer the calls. Police do. Many cops across the country just don't want to handle family fights as crimes. Phoenix Sergeant Jim Hornberg. When the policy first went into effect, what kind of grumbling did you hear from cops?
It's a matter of having to change an entire mentality, a way of thinking that had been established for quite a while, And some of the officers, I'm not saying everyone, but some of us did feel that we were being forced into a position that we had no say in formulating in the first place.
I mean, they were forced to go into the home which was considered a sanctuary, or?
Traditionally, a man's home is considered to be his castle, and what happens under a man's roof should be no one else's business, including that of the police.
And my nose is
Put your chin around there.
and I can't
Put your hands behind your back.
That looks like it's broken.
David, you're under arrest for domestic violence.
One of the motives for moving toward mandatory arrest came from a study done in Minneapolis. Rose's boyfriend, David, smashed her in the face with a frying pan. Like many abusive relationships, the violence was repetitive. David had beaten Rose before. But this time, police, as part of the study, put David in jail for the night. Criminologist Larry Sherman conducted the experiment.
Arresting cut the repeat violence rate in half. So that's one good reason why I think a lot of chiefs read that research and said, hey, we got to start making arrests.
Arresting cut the rate in half?
The percentage of offenders who repeated their violence against the woman was half in the arrest category of what it was in the non-arrest categories.
Why is that, do you suppose?
Well, the classic argument is that punishment deters.
It's a sort of a shock effect.
Yeah, exactly.
I disagree with that.
Torrington, Connecticut Police Chief Joseph Hayes.
You get someone who is an abuser like that, domestic violence, and they get arrested, they're going to do it again. They'll do it again. In a lot of cases where a woman is heavily beaten and so forth, and she complains of being beaten before, no, I don't think it's going to help it. I think the man needs help. He needs to get a shrink or something, really.
You don't think a night in jail is going to do it?
No.
That attitude cost Chief Hayes' department almost $2 million. The court ruled that his officers should have arrested Charles Thurman and didn't. Tracy Thurman had called the Torrington police repeatedly for help with her abusive husband. He was finally hauled in after he stabbed her 13 times, leaving her partially paralyzed. If a woman calls up and says, my husband's trying to kill me, would you treat that the same as if a local businessman called you and said the mob is after me?
We'd get there just as fast as any other case. Now, I don't know whether you want to refer to the mobs or not, but if Sam called up and said Joe's trying to kill him, we'd get there just as fast.
Which case would your officers rather go on?
I think they'd rather go on the one between Sam and Joe, really. They could handle it easier.
Chief Hayes' department is being sued again for failing to protect a second woman from a domestic abuser. The Phoenix police aren't taking any chances. To change the attitude among officers, the department went back to the basics. Every new recruit and veteran cop practices handling family fights in workshops. Police play the parts of the abuser and the abused. It's become a standard course in their professional training.
All you need is a good ass whipping is all you need.
That man is obviously going to do something to believe.
Well, he's just mad.
You don't see none. I want you out of here. You guys got no reason to be here.
In domestic violence calls, the majority of them are criminal calls. There's no doubt about it. Millions of victims a year can testify to that.
Phoenix Chief Ruben Ortega served on the President's Commission on Domestic Violence. What's been the effect of changing the policy here?
But we're saying now that if you're going to slap your spouse around in the city, and we know of it, chances are you're going to go to jail.
Not in Yonkers, New York. There they still handle domestic violence the old-fashioned way. Like half the police departments in the country, they arrest only when the victim files a formal complaint. Yvonne Hall was assaulted by her estranged husband.
Do you wish to make a complaint if we get into him during the night?
Yeah.
You will make a complaint?
Yeah, because he done broke the lock of my door, so I don't know if he's going to, push his way back in and lock or not.
That left police no choice. They had to take her husband to headquarters and book him. But she had to go downtown, too, for the paperwork, leaving her 4 children alone late at night. You don't think it should be easy for the victim to just, say, throw him in jail?
No, I wouldn't want that to be a capricious act on the part of some individual. It wouldn't be fair.
What does it take to go to jail in Yonkers?
Well, it's not Yonkers, it's the New York State laws.
Yonkers Police Chief Owen McLean.
The smack is not a crime. In most cases, it's in a harassment or it's a violation for which you don't usually go to jail. A couple of smacks is just a misdemeanor at most, which in most cases you don't go to jail for, if it can be resolved in other matters. We put people in jail as a last resort.
But you only put them in jail as a last resort and if someone has been willing to file charges against them.
Yes, it's to hold those persons to answer for the charge.
And most of the time, nobody goes to jail in Yonkers. When the police answered this call, the woman said she'd been roughed up by her husband, who insisted our camera leave. This wife didn't want to file charges, so the Yonkers police did what they've been taught to do.
We got them separated and let them understand where we stood and what they should do for the balance of the night. And I'm sure the tempers will simmer down.
It's called mediation, a practice police have been using for decades.
Forget about the immediate problem and take it up in the morning when cooler heads prevail. We're knowledgeable of the incident. If they call again, there's conceivable could be an arrest situation.
What they'd been told by the Justice Department and all the experts in the field was that mediation was the best way to deal with it. Never make an arrest.